Welcome back to Hilaal Live. Now, Dr. Farooq Meer passed away last month, and he comes from a long line of family members that fought against the apartheid government. Dr. Meer was a long-serving member of the Natal Indian Congress, the United Democratic Movement, and the ANC. And his family, as I mentioned, comes from that history of struggle stalwarts. Now, joining us now was one of his closest friends and fellow comrade, the current Public Enterprises Minister, Minister Pravin Gordhan. Minister Gordhan, good evening and thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Good evening and assalamu alaikum to all of you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, Minister Gordhan. Minister Gordhan, let's talk of Dr. Meer, just his dedication of being a struggle stalwart, and you, of course, knowing him personally and being with him during those dark times of apartheid.
Yes, Dr. Meer, as you said, comes from a family of people, both on his parents' side, but his brother-in-law as well, in the form of I.C. Meer, from a family that had a long contribution to the democratic struggles in South Africa. And he himself was an anaesthetist, practiced in Durban, but gave a lot of his time from about 1971 to the Natal Indian Congress. Oops.
Yeah. Minister, you still there?
I would need.
Minister, you are still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, you
sorry,
can continue.
Something that. Yes. And since then, he's been on the executive of the Natal Indian Congress, first as a treasurer, later as a secretary, and throughout the next 30, 40 to 50 years, he has been an advocate of democracy, of democratic values, and vehemently opposed to any form of oppression, any form of discrimination, and a champion of democracy in South Africa as well. He and I were also chosen by the NIC to represent the organization when CODESA first started at the end of 1991, and had the privilege of attending the first meeting where the basis for CODESA and later the multi-party negotiations actually took place.
Minister Gordhan, him, of course, being one of those stalwarts that came from such a rich history, because, of course, his late father was there during the passive resistance movement, which, of course, started by Mahatma Gandhi. So, you know, looking at his family history and looking at their contribution, including his sister, Fatima Meer, I mean, that just shows that the entire family really were dedicated to making sure that apartheid ended.
No, absolutely. And of course, that was a period that many people today, particularly our young folk, have forgotten very quickly. But it was a period of great danger, of great hazard. You could easily end up in Robben Island if you broke the law. You would be harassed by what was then called the security police. And we've forgotten that the Indian community, like other black communities, was discriminated against by the apartheid regime purely on the basis of color, sometimes on the basis of religion as well, and that we all survived the Group Areas Act and were victims of it in one form or another. We had to use different entrances. We could go to parks but not sit on the benches because they were for whites only. And this is something that our younger generation should understand, is the history that we've come from. It's a history that has left deep memories in our psyche as well. And the democracy that we enjoy today, notwithstanding its difficulties, is a product of fighting against all those different forms of discrimination, but also importantly, uniting with all other communities that suffered a similar fate and often worse than what the Indian community faced during those years as well. And so you had, by the mid-1950s, the Defiance Campaign, and later the Freedom Charter and the Congress Alliance. And when you had the treason trial in the late 1950s, early 1960s, late 1950s more, you had people from all the black communities, including white Democrats, who were charged by the apartheid regime for treason. And eventually, of course, were all acquitted. But in the early 1960s, a number of anti-apartheid organizations like the ANC, PAC, the Communist Party, were banned. And later, our leaders were imprisoned, had to go into exile, were banished for one reason or another to all parts of the country, and could not participate in political activity, which today, of course, we take for granted. So this is a rich history of the Mead family, but of the broader communities as well. And for their contribution to the democratic South Africa that we have today. And of course, our task is to build on that democracy, to build on the values that they propagate. We continuously improve life in South Africa for the vast majority of our people.
Minister Gordhan, I was speaking to his daughter Nadia, of course, who made this interview happen, and she told me that her late father spoke at the funeral of Steve Biko. I mean, that in itself just shows that all of the communities, all of the oppressed communities really came together and wanted to end the scourge, which was apartheid, because it just shows how unified South Africans were in wanting to make sure that what it was happening needed to end.
No, absolutely. And as I said, the late 1970s and the early 1970s was a period of tremendous hazard. And most professionals and members of the public would be very scared to be identified with any Congress of any kind. And here you had a unique set of people. We were still students in the early 70s at university, but George Supersad, Jerry Kubadia, Farooq Meer, and many others were very brave to relaunch the Natal Indian Congress at the time and ensured that on each of these important occasions, they, in one form or another, contribute their messages to the event that took place, whether it was the killing of Ahmed Timol in the mid-1970s by the security police, the killing of Steve Biko. Much later, of course, the members of different communities that collaborated with apartheid in the local affairs committees, in the South African Indian Council, in the tricameral parliament. And throughout all that period, people like Farooq Meer and many others, both in the then Natal and Transvaal and elsewhere in the country, made sure that those institutions were total failures, and less than 10% of our communities actually participated in any form whatsoever. And all of that led to the launch of the United Democratic Front. And on the 20th of August this year, we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the United Democratic Front that brought over 600 organizations from throughout South Africa, whether it was women's movements, youth movements, civic organizations, trade unions, political formations, under one banner. And UDF played a powerful role, and Farooq Meer was very much in the mix at the time to mobilize people against the apartheid system. And a few years later, we saw the release of Ahmed Kathrada, Walter Sisulu, and their associates and comrades, and later Nelson Mandela and the unbanning of the African National Congress.
Minister Gordhan, just in about 30 to 45 seconds, both you and I are from Indian descent. How did Farooq Meer inspire the leadership of many of our Indians who, of course, participated in that new dawn of democracy, but also now the Indians who have the opportunity to play a role within spheres of government, civil society, and elsewhere, to just continue to inspire leadership within us, the Indian community, but not just in the Indian community, but in the broader community within South Africa?
No, we have powerful role models that go back to the beginning of the previous century and into this one as well. Whether it was Mahatma Gandhi or whether it was Monty Naika, Yusuf Dadu, the Kachalyas in Johannesburg, and many, many others in what is today KwaZulu-Natal as well. And what did they leave behind for us? They left behind a country that can be proud of itself. It's left behind a country that will have difficulties from time to time, but the public-spirited people amongst us must make themselves available to be honest activists, to promote democracy, to fight corruption in any form whatsoever, wherever we have it, and to ensure that at the end of the day, the majority of South Africans benefit from a better future and a better life. And that's the legacy that both our generation and the younger generations need to take forward and make public service a part of their lives as well. So we enjoy being on our own and with our families, but many of us, I think, need to create a new generation of activists who will continue to carry the struggle for democracy and a better and deeper democracy forward.
Minister Gordhan, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live. We hope to have you again here in our studios to chat so much more what's going on in the country. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And again, thank you.
Alaikum salam. Thank you.
That's Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, and a very dear friend to the late Farooq Meer. After the break, I will have your latest in news. To stay tuned.